Welcome back to Coffee Talk. I am Stefan and you are beautiful. Today on Coffee Talk, we get to sit down with the legendary Marty Davidson, the writer and director of the iconic film The Lords of Flatbush. Discover the untold stories behind this cult classic that launched careers of Hollywood giants like Sylvester Stallone and Henry Winkler.
And let me tell you, man, it's real.
All right, so writing The Lords of Flatbush, what inspired you?
What happened was after I left the fans notes feeling as if I'm starting my whole life over, and Warner Brothers gave me an office, and I went in every day and I started writing a screenplay based on my going to Tilden High School and my three best friends. I was writing a script about what it was like for the four of us. Now, the interesting thing about us was we were called Ivy League guys. We wore button-down shirts. We wore white buck shoes. We wore pants with a belt in the back. We were called collegiate. We were clean cut. The girls liked us, and you could take us anywhere. Okay, that's the kind of guys we were. I ran into a guy when I was an age. There was a guy when I was an age named Steve Verona who made commercials, a few at least, and he wanted to get into the film business, and he befriended me. He was also from Brooklyn, and so he thought that was a way that we would get together, that I would represent him and try to get him a film career, but I never did. While I was working on my script about the guy, four Ivy League guys, my wife Sandy and I went out for dinner one night on 2nd Avenue. And then I walk in and sitting there right in the front of the restaurant at a table with his girlfriend, Steve Verona. And he says, Marty, who's thrilled to see me. And hey, Steve, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. And the place was kind of crowded. He said, why don't you going to eat dinner? And I said, yeah. And he said, why don't you join us? He said how happy he was to see me. He says, because, I'm actually making a movie. I said, really? Who are you doing it with? He said, I'm doing it on my own. I said, what do you mean? You financing it on your own? No studio? No. He said, no, I raised the money. I said, in those days, movies cost between $1.5 million and $2 million to make a studio picture. Not too bad when you compare it to what's today is that studio picture starts at 50 million. So it's between 2 million was the norm. I said, you raised that kind of money? He said, no. I said, I get the money from my mom. I said, are you that rich? He said, no, we're doing it. We're in a tough budget. We got 60 grand. I said, Steve, you really gonna make a movie for 60? And he says, but I also have some 16 millimeter. We're shooting in 16 millimeter, and I have some film. And I think we could do it. And I have a camera and blah blah blah. And I said, good luck to you. And he said, what are you doing? I said, interesting enough, I'm writing a script, and we shall see what kind of. I said, what's your script about? He said, it's about guys in Brooklyn like us, like me. I was a tough guy. I thought I was a tough guy when I went to school. So I'm doing a thing about a guy called Sexual Freedom in Brooklyn. And it's about these guys who wear black leather, like I did, wear black leather jackets and stuff. And I said, really? I said, it's a drama or a comedy? He said, well, it's kind of, in the opening scene, we talk to the camera. It's like the opening scene. The guy comes on his motorcycle. The lead character comes on his motorcycle. Screenshot, I think, and he's telling the story. And we're down there. We're low, and he comes racing right to the camera. And then he does a wheelie, and he does a wheelie. And he comes down and he says, "Hi, my name is Chico, and this is my turf. If you want to hop along, I'll show you the place I live. Come on, hop on the motorcycle." And they take off. It was kind of a little caricature of what he did.
How you doing? I'm Chico Terrell. I star in the movie you're going to see tonight, The Lords of Flatbush.
You and me, riding down the road.
It was a guy who's taking us on a tour of Brooklyn, in the Brooklyn he knew, from his first person And he talks to the camera throughout. He's our guide. Not my type of thing, but okay. You know, I'm more into drama and whatever. And I said, well, good luck with it. You know, he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm writing about four guys, but very different from your four guys. You guys are Ivy League, buttoned down. And it's a story about, I have these relationships of these four guys, and I'm very early in the script. And he said, and we got through it. He said, would you do me a favor? Would you read my script? I'm starting to shoot in 2 weeks. And I love your comments. I really would value your comments. In fact, it wasn't him who said it. It was his girlfriend, who was one of the writers. Her name's Gail Gleckler. She eventually got credit on Lords of Flatbush. So Gail said, Marty, would you read our script? Because I have a feeling you might be able to give us a little inside information from your perspective. You deal with the studios and everything. And I said, I'd be glad to, sure. So next morning I woke up to get my New York Times, which is on my door outside my apartment building, or outside my door in the apartment building. And sitting on top of it at 8 in the morning is Sexual Freedom in Brooklyn. They had it off early in the morning. So I read it, and it's an embarrassment. It's not my type of thing. And I had to break the news to him. He asked me would I come down and talk to him. He's got all his mother's money. At any rate, he convinces me, or I convince him, that he shouldn't shoot this because he's just going to throw away the money. And I said, but you know, the one thing I like, I got to tell you, what I like about what I read, and the reason I think I have any interest at all in even pursuing any further conversation is I'm writing a script about four guys from Brooklyn who wear button-down shirts and white buck shoes. I love the idea of doing a movie about the four guys who wear black leather jackets and boots and maybe ride a motorcycle, but they have the same kind of needs and values that my four guys have, but we've never gotten to see them. They're always the bad guys, the hard guys, the rocks, the black leather clad guys. They're always they just want to fight. They just want to rumble. I like the idea of maybe combining the values of what I'm doing with the kind of the appearance of what you're doing. And he said, I love that. Gail, you said, this would be great. I said, no talking to the camera, no wheelie, none of that stuff. He said, no. So we decided to put his film on hold. And from that, I started working with the actors and doing improvisations. And we put it off for the movie got pushed off, I'd say 4 months, and started from scratch.
You guys met and basically combined both ideas together. How about that? I mean, come on.
Yeah, we combined putting the movie I had in mind into black. I changed their clothes, basically. Yeah. And gave them an attitude of talking the way Stanley Marcello speaks as opposed to the way Marty Davidson speaks. You know, I was writing about Marty Davidson. So, and working with Stallone was one of the great joys I've ever experienced because he is wonderful at improvisation. And when Steve, I must say, Steve had cast his movie he was fully cast. I fired everybody except 2 people. Paul Mace, who played the little guy in the
Wimpy, his name and the character.
Yeah. Paul Mace, who passed away unfortunately right after we made the movie, and Sly Stallone, who was a part of Steve's movie, and he had no dialogue really. He just all he ever said was "Let's arm wrestle, let's rumble." And when I met him, I realized this guy goes way beyond that. So I started doing improvisations with him, and he was so inventive. And then a stroke of fortune. When I was an agent, one of the young actors, also from Brooklyn, Paul Jabara, who then later went on to an Academy Award.
You read it?
I will, all right. And the winner is Paul Jabara. Last dance from Bedtime Friday.
I want to thank you all for coming to my bar mitzvah.
Paul Jabara is starring in a play in London. And he had always also wanted me to represent him. And he was a very clever guy. And he was doing a play in London, Robert Stigwood play, his big success play. I forget the name of that too. You get older, you forget proper nouns. At any rate, he calls me up out of the blue while we're in rehearsals and we're working out of Verona's apartment at Fifth Avenue, down by all the way down by Washington Square Park. At any rate, I get a phone call, and I stop what I'm doing, and the person who answers the phone says, "It's Marty, it's for you. It's from London." I don't know anybody in London. So I answer, and he says, "Marty?" And I said, "Yeah, who's this?" He says, "Paul Jabara, your friend from Brooklyn." And I said, "Paul, what are you doing in London?" He said, "I'm doing a play with Stigwood. I've been doing it for a year and I'm going insane. I got to get back to the United States. And somebody just told me that you're making a movie about some guys from Flatbush like me. And I need you to put me in your movie because I have an out clause for a movie and I could get the hell out of this play and get back to America." I said, Paul. I said, "We're making this movie on a shoestring. We don't have any money to hire you. I don't have a role for you. I don't know whatever. I'd love to help, but I don't know anything." He said, "Marty, think about it. Please think about it." I said, "I'll think about it, Pope. I got my hands full here. I don't know if we're ever going to get this thing started off the ground. It's insanity. You're better off staying in your play with Robert Stigwood. I promise you, you're better off staying there." So we hang up. I go about what I'm doing for 5 hours. 5 hours passes. But Marty, got that call from London again. I said, "Paul, what's up?" He says, "I'm going to do a scene for you." I said, "What?" He said, "I have a scene to do for you. You said you're doing improvisations. I'm going to do an improvisation for you. Will you give me 5 minutes? I said, "Of course, I'll give you 5 minutes." He says, "First, let me introduce you to somebody." He says, "Maria, get on." So on the other phone, "Marty?" And I said, "Yeah," it's a female voice. She says, "This is Ave Maria de Benedetta Smith, and Paul tells me you are fabulous." I said, "Hello, Ave Maria. We're going to do a scene for you. An improvisation, just like you like." I said, "Have at it." So they do an improvisation about a guy takes his girlfriend to a jewelry store and she wants an engagement ring and he wants to buy her an ID bracelet.
Stanley, we could do it on the layaway plan. Stanley could even have them consigned.
I don't want nothing on consignment, Annie. Do me a favor. Why don't you go outside and run your teeth on the curb? Do me a favor, would you?
Very funny,
Don't
Stanley.
talk to
Ha,
her
ha,
like
ha.
that, Stanley. What do you think? She's one of the boys on the corner?
Oh, but the writing?
She's my best friend, and she's going to be my maid of honor.
And they do this scene at a jewelry store. It's finished. I love it. And I say, "Paul, I'll tell you what. If this works, I'll be amazed. I will send you a telegram with a firm offer of 1 week's work for $300. And if you can get out of your contract with Stigwood for that, I'll find something for you." And Maria, I don't know what I can do for you, but I have a funny feeling if you were here, I would find something for you. At any rate, 2 days passed. And all of a sudden, the doorbell rings, and now we were rehearsing and working and stuff. The actors and whatever costumes were working every out of a one-bedroom apartment. And in walks Ave Maria de Benedetta Smith. She flew back to New York to meet me, and she says, "I'm here. Find something for me." I said, "Hold on." I call over Stallone. And I said, "I'm going to do an improvisation. I'm going to be the jeweler. You're going to be Stanley, and this is your girlfriend. Let's see, we have an Annie in the movie. You could be Annie. Okay? This is Franny. this is Stanley, and you want to buy him, you want him to buy you an engagement ring. I'm the jeweler. Action.
Stanley, I don't want it! I don't want it!
And all of a sudden, the movie changed. I now had a character in that Sylvester was going to play that not only was just the tough guy who wants to rumble, he's got a girlfriend. They're going to get married. Here's a relationship. It's going to grow. And from that, the whole movie started to change drastically. Wow. And that's how that movie was made. It's like that. It was all constantly growing.
That movie, it introduces the world to Rocky and the Fonz. I mean, at this time of Stallone's career, he was almost going to give up. And was he about to?
He'd gotten off to a very slow beginning. I think he was in a girly movie or whatever they call them. He was an extra in a Woody Allen movie on a train, on a subway. He spent 2 lines of dialogue, and he had, he wanted to be a writer. Really, he was writing. His woman who he married worked at a movie theater over on 3rd Avenue, the Cinema One, and he didn't work. He would sit home all day writing.
I really have to thank you publicly for that, because without him I wouldn't have been here. Because I quit basically. I was going to paint and write, and I couldn't get any jobs acting. Before I knew any tricks of the trade, before I was savvy about really the internal workings of the business. This is just pure having fun. We probably did more rehearsing on this film than I've done in the last 40 films. Really, because he worked it a long time. Was it like months and months and months? Things would shut down, and then he'd start to film again, and we go through cast changes, but it just getting better and better. And to this, if that one performance there and being able to use some of these ad libs and scenes, and then he would take them and rework them, it really developed whatever style I had.
And he darkened in his windows. He lived above a deli on 57th and Lexington. And he would write all day, and of hoping to get his movies made as a screenwriter. And maybe if he was fortunate, there would be a role for him. So this came about. He got lucky. How my partner, Verona, met him is John Hertzfeld, who went on to have a nice career as a writer-director, was Sly's best friend.
We just hit it off. We didn't fit in, which made us probably successful.
Friend, and he came in to audition for Steve Verona, and he did a scene with his best friends for Sylvester Stallone. And so Steve was smart enough to hire Stallone to be the tough guy in the movie he had in mind. And that's how he got into our movie, almost by accident, but he was big and strong, it seemed like, so he would be the tough guy. So Sly always worked as a writer, right? And that's how Rocky came to be. One of the scripts he wrote while we were doing it was, at any rate, some guy out in California eventually read it, loved it, and decided to make it, but they couldn't make it at United Artists with Sly. He wasn't a big enough name for it. The studio wanted either Ryan O'Neal or to play Rocky kind of characters, and or what's his name from The Godfather, James
Caan.
Yeah, James Caan. Those were the people, and they were playing around with that, and the actors didn't know if they wanted to do it and whatever. And Sly kept holding out, saying, "I want to do it. I want to do it." And eventually, he convinced his producers to take a look at him as an actor. So I had the only print at the time. Our movie hadn't come out yet.
Yeah.
And I showed it to them. They liked it. They thought what Sly did was very interesting.
I want that ring, Stanley.
I got a ring for you, Fanny. I got a ring for you. Around my bathtub.
I want to go home, make up a joke. I'm going to tell you a new joke tomorrow, okay? Good night, Adrian.
Good night, Rocky.
So they convinced the guys in California to look at it. They approved but then it had to be sent to New York to the head of the company. He was at the time I thought aging. He was 60s, I think, the head of the place. So I get a call from Sly saying, "Do you have a copy of the film?" I was living on 55th Street, and United Artists was on 58th Street and Park Avenue. He says, "Do you have a copy of the Lords that we could show to the head of United Artists today? Is there any chance you have a copy?" And I said, "I have the only copy." And he said, "Would you mind if we showed it to him?" And I said, No. So they called me, and I said, "I'll bring it over." So I took the 4 blocks from where I lived, dropped it off, and they were going to see it later that afternoon. The way I understand it, the head of the studio, I can't remember his name now all of a sudden, took his assistant with him to see the screening that afternoon, the 2 afternoon after lunch. And the 2 of them sat in a darkened screening room at United Artists. And the head of the studio said, after about 10 minutes of watching the film, he said, "He's not bad." And his assistant, who was I met him, very fey, gay young man. And he said, "Oh, I find him quite attractive, very attractive."
And that was it.
They're watching some more. He says, "He's different looking than I anticipated." He says, "In what way?" He said, "He's more fair than I expected Mr. Stallone to be." And he said, "A lot of Italian men are fair. Something can be done with that." Well, I like him. I see what they see. Okay, that's enough. And he stopped watching the movie after 15, 20 minutes. He was looking at Perry King. He thought Perry King was the character, not Sylvester Stallone. He gave them the okay. And then made a movie with Sylvester Stallone as opposed to Perry King, who the head of the studio thought he had hired.
Wild. Wild. But without the Lords of Flatbush, there might not be no Rocky, Stallone, and Rocky. That was
what happened before that was, of course, while American Graffiti came out just before us. We started 2 years before them because it took me 3 years. They came out about 6 months before us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about growing up, as everybody knows, about teenage kids growing up in a small town in California. At any rate, when I was showing my movie to get distribution before I got Columbia to buy it, I sort of took, having been a successful agent, I knew all the heads of the studios. I went to California with the print, stayed at the Beverly Hills Hotel on borrowed money because I hadn't earned a dime in 3 years. My father-in-law loaned me enough money to stay at a fancy hotel and take out an ad in the trade papers. And I showed it to the heads of the studios. And the head of Paramount, Michael Eisner, liked the movie, called me and said, "I like it, Marty, but a little too New York for what we can do with this picture. But thank you and good luck with it." And I'll show it somewhere else, right? Hoping for a chance to make, it's a 16 millimeter film made for $160,000. Chances were not great. At any rate, Michael Eisner not only was the head of the motion picture department at Paramount, he was also head of television. And he had earlier made a deal with Gary Marshall to do a TV series based on a kind of a steal from American Graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
And they shot it in the Midwest instead of in California. And Gary Marshall has just turned in, it's called Happy Days. And he showed it to Mr. Eisner and said, "What do you think?" when he finished editing his film. And Eisner said, "I like it, but." I said, "What do you mean, but?" He says, "It's a little too one note for me." In what way? But they're all the characters are all. It needs some edge to it that it doesn't have now. Something a little out of the ordinary. He said, like what? Like, I have an idea for you. And he said, really? What's your idea? He said, I just saw a movie that was made also about young kids in high school, but different. They're in Brooklyn. You're in the Midwest. I would like you to write a character who arrives to Milwaukee on a motorcycle and befriends these other people out of some reason, family member or whatever. He comes there. He's a fish out of water. He's totally different. So it brings a whole different. Would that happen? He says, you make it happen. But we already finished editing. He says, I know, but I'm going to give you money to go back and shoot one more day. I want you to write a scene for this guy's arrival on his motorcycle, and we're going to edit to the pilot, and we're going to put you on the air. I said, okay, fair enough. Do you have anyone in mind? He says, his name is Sylvester Stallone. I want you to hire Sylvester Stallone to play this guy. Okay. He looks it up and he finds Sylvester's manager, who I had introduced him to. So he'd been an agent with me. And I made her his manager, Jane Oliver. Jane Oliver gets a call from Gary Marshall. And he says, I got good news for you. I want to hire an actor of yours. And I'd like him to just get to know him a little bit. It's guaranteed. I'm offering him. It's one day's work, but he's going to be a regular on our series, which is going on ABC in the fall. It's called Happy Days. And the actor, of course, is Sylvester Stallone. So I'd like to see him immediately. And she says, well, that's very nice. That's great. Let me call Sly and tell him about this call, and I'll call you right back. Okay, fine. I'll be waiting. We got to do this right away. We have no time. I'm writing the part already for him. I'll have it tomorrow for him. Okay, let me talk to Sly. She calls up Sly, still up high above Lexington Avenue writing. And she says, I know you're not going to be jumping up and down with this. I know you well enough by now. Gary Marshall, who's wonderful, he's blah, 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 blah. And he just did a pilot, and they want you to be in it. They want to meet you and talk to you about the role. And he says, Jane, you know, I told you this when you said you want to manage me. She said, I know. He says, I don't do TV. Yeah, but I got a call from the head of Paramount Pictures, Michael Eisner, wants you to do it. I can't say what you just told me. He says, I'll go in and meet him. You will? Yeah, sure. Why not? I'm not going to embarrass you or anything. So next day he goes in, he meets them, they take it for granted that they got their guy. Look at him, I know exactly what I'm going to do, blah, blah, blah. I got a chance to see the movie, everything's great. And Sly looks at him and says, no. I don't know if anybody told you this, but I don't do TV. Surely, no, I don't do TV, but I didn't want to be rude. And that was the end of the meeting. So Gary Marshall calls up Michael Eisner, says, he don't do TV. Eisner says, get one of the other ones.
Wow.
Comes Winkler the next day. And Henry plays in The Lords of Flatbush, the guy who's going to go to college. He's educated, nice Jewish boy, blah, blah, blah.
You're a schmuck because you got brains. Not a lot. But you got brains and you're wasting them.
Oh, don't stop now, man. You're just getting hot. I ought to be taking notes.
And he says, your character's a little different from what I had in mind. He says, can you do a little more of what Sly's role was in the movie, and Henry looks and says, "Hey," he says, "You got it," and that's how he shot one day. They put it into the pilot, and then it became. And then later on, of course, they wanted him a girlfriend after a couple of episodes. So he said, "We have some ideas for you." He says, "No. I have a better idea. You know, in the movie, we have Annie and Franny. Annie and Franny. Annie and Franny. Laverne and Shirley. Laverne and Shirley. They created Laverne and Shirley. So they then gave him a girlfriend, and that became Laverne and Shirley. So and then Henry introduced me to Gary Marshall at a softball game they were playing. I went down to see them play, and Gary Marshall, I'd never met him before. He walked over to me, grabbed me by the head, pulled me, kissed me on the lips, said, "You've made me a rich man." Marshall.
Lords of Flatbush, it's such an important movie just out there for transforming history in film and TV. I feel if it wasn't for Lords of Flatbush, there'd be no Stallone as Rocky. There'd be no Henry Winkler as the Fonz. I mean, the character Butchie Weinstein, with the part where he's called out by the soda jerk in that scene was such a great scene.
Eddie, I'm going to do something wonderful with my life, and I owe it all to you. Hey, Eddie. Good night.
And it's the movie. If anybody has not seen this film, it's a must. It's a classic, and it's raw. And you see these young artists like Stallone and what they are today, and Henry Winkler. It's incredible. But the star of the film, Perry King, I always thought he's
a wonderful actor.
It was a very odd situation, but we all really enjoyed it. You would kind of pick the director you wanted to talk to. So Sly worked with Stephen Verona mostly. I worked mostly with Marty Davidson. But it was an odd situation, but it worked very well.
He's a great actor.
Yeah.
Great actor. But the whole cast is great. Susan Blakely, she was so gorgeous and still a pretty lady. But
Sharky in a small role. Paul Jabara, who of course made everything happen. He plays Crazy Cohen, and in the middle of the movie, I have him write a song, and it becomes the Lords of Flatbush. That they all sing in the candy store. And of course, that led me to a trilogy of films that I made throughout my career over a 20-year period, which is basically, I take the same four guys from Brooklyn and from the Lords of Flatbush, and I took that idea of them being able to sing, and that what the role that Paul Jabara adds to them in that candy store sings, which is the Lords of Flatbush, and they do that. Then I made a movie 10 years later.
It was 18 years ago that a turquoise Chevy convertible went off the Raritan Bridge. Its driver was Eddie Wilson of Eddie and the Cruisers. His body was never found.
I decided to do Eddie and the Cruisers. And instead of the four guys being in Brooklyn, I put them in New Jersey. Okay, but it's the same, basically, the four guys. And then 10 years after that, I made this movie with the Armand Assante and Looking for an Echo.
And the director of Lords of Flatbush and Eddie and the Cruisers. A story about finding our dreams.
Which is the same. Now they're 50. So I went from 18 to 30 to 50 of a life of four guys always and who have a love for music and that inside of them. And it's just an evolution to me. They're all part of one movie, one life stuff, one life.
I could dissect this film with you forever. I love it. Richard Gere, let's go there. What's the backstory with Richard Gere?
It was part of Verona's original cast. So when I started working with Richard, was very, very young at the time, maybe 21 years old. a little younger than all the other actors were older than the characters they played. Stallone was probably 26 and Henry was 25. And Richard was just starting out. He was a great looking kid, a wonderful guy. But he was just at the very, very, very beginning of his career. And I started doing improvisations, like I said. And he had great difficulty with the improvisation, Richard did. And finally, we're doing this one scene where I have them in a pigeon coop, which eventually became that scene at the where Hurricane comes up and meets him, and he tells him about his dream of what he wants to do with his life, you know, and what it means, like the pigeons, how he would fly, and Sly had this gift, and Richard was very uncomfortable in it. And Sly was, and they became antagonistic towards one another. And I could see, if I'm going to do this film through these, if I'm rewriting this over this period of time, these next 2 months, I thought it'd be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, it kept getting longer and longer. If I'm going to do it this way, I need somebody who's very comfortable through improvisation, because that's how we're going to, I'm not going to sit down and write it at the desk. I'm going to improvise, I'm going to tape it, and I'm going to rewrite it off of the tapes. That's how I'm making this script to happen. And I was very uncomfortable with it, and Sly and he were really not getting along well. And I made the decision, and Sly kind of led the way to a brother to me kind of attitude, and without necessarily saying that, I don't think. And I remember taking Richard out of down to a delicatessen across the street from where we were working, in a rehearsal studio on 45th Street, and I talked to him about it. And when it was over, I thought it would be best if we didn't continue, that I would make a change.
Wow.
And it was very difficult. It's one of the, I think it's the only actor I've ever call it fired in my life. I don't like to think of it as fired, but we decided to, the situation wasn't right. It wasn't working. And there was no money to be made. There was no reason to believe the movie would ever see the light of day. We're making a movie for 60 grand, basically. It eventually cost 150 over 3 after we went back and raised more money, because we shot 3 different times over those 3 years. When I raised more money, they edited what I would edit. At any rate, Richard didn't think he was really losing out on a film that would eventually even see it. So we kind of hugged goodbye, if that's a way to put it. But it wasn't antagonistic, it wasn't mean, it was pained. But we said, it's not working. It's just not working. We parted.
Only different people say to do. And one day we'll feel like
you parted.
Yeah. And that's when I called Jane, who I'd work with as an agent, was the Adika, and she represented Perry King. And he had just done Slaughterhouse-5, big movie, and I didn't think he'd want to even do it, for $300 a week. But he came in, and I really liked him, and he met me, and he said, "Yeah, I'm there. You got me. I never thought I'd play a guy like this." He went to an Ivy League college. Perry couldn't be more different from the Lords of Flatbush, but he did ride a motorcycle, which was great. He loved motorcycles. So at any rate, I brought him in, and then Henry, I came up with an idea for that 4th role, and I called the agent, who was an old friend of mine from the agent days again. "Jane, I want you to set up a meeting for me to meet this actor." She says, Marty, I don't know if he'll come to meet you on this. He has big plans. He's just done this big movie in Texas with Goldie Hawn, this one new young director, Steven Spielberg. And I And I said, do it. She said,
well, where's he now?
Oh, we're in Sugar Land.
She said, I'll tell you what, I'll try to do this for you if you do something for me. And I said, anything. What can I do? She says, I represent a young actor who's studying at Yale, and I think he would be someone you love. And he might be able to play this role better than what you're suggesting. And I said, you got it. Whoever it is, I'll be glad. She said, but you have to see him over the weekend, like on Saturday, because he's going to school at Yale, and I'll get him to come down to see you if you'll see him on a Saturday. I said, no problem. We work 7 days a week. Saturday, first Saturday you want, set it up. Let me know, but you'll let me meet so-and-so, right? And she said, I'll try my best. I said, okay. So she sets up me, she goes back, she says, he could meet you at 12:30. Where do you want to meet? I said, this is on 8th Avenue and 6th Avenue and 8th Street. There's a Nathan's hot dog stand, restaurant there that just opened. I'll meet him for some hot dogs and we'll talk there, because my office is going to be a mess. There's all kinds of things going on there. So she said, you got it. 12:30. I go there and it's Henry Winkler. I talked to him for a while. I call, our office was 2 blocks away. I call up Sly, who's there. I said, come by, let me buy you a hot dog. He comes and joins us, and the three of us have a great time, and that's how Henry got the part.
Wow.
I didn't need the other actor anymore. I never met him. Abernathy, what was his name? It's horrible to become 85. You lose your memory. At any rate, that's how Henry became Butchie. We wrote it from that point forward.
You know something, Chico? I really don't understand you. I really don't.
Incredible. Great role. Is it I might be pronouncing his name wrong. William Atherton, is that correct?
Yeah.
That's who it is?
That's the actor who I wanted to see.
It's all over after this incredible ordeal. What are your feelings?
And who I never got to see. I didn't need to. She said she tried to start the meeting. Atherton was the actor. But I was glad to have Henry.
It's just a turning point for everybody, and a true classic, one of my favorites, and also a favorite of Quentin Tarantino, correct? Who is a big fan.
Meet Quentin because I saw him at a screening of his last feature, the one that's set in Florida, California, about the movie. What's that called? His last film.
Once Upon a Time. The one that he.
That was his last movie. And anyway, there was a screening downtown in New York and I'd already seen the movie, and I got invited to this screening, and I didn't want to go see it again. It's a 3-hour movie and blah, blah, blah. My wife convinced me that you should go see Quentin Tarantino, because he owned a theater, or he still does, in Hollywood on La Brea, where it was on Beverly Boulevard and La Brea, a block from La Brea, the Beverly Theater. And he plays great movies there all the time, classics and whatever. And he played the Lords of Flatbush there and wrote an article about it, a 2-page article. Check and send you. You can look it up. You just type in Quentin Tarantino and Lords of Flatbush, it will pop. It's a wonderful article about the Lords of Flatbush. At any rate, he was screening the movie, and I was in New York, so I didn't get to go or anything. At any rate, when he was going to be here after the screening of his movie downtown, he was going to do a Q&A after. And my wife said to me, why don't you go down and meet him? We were having dinner that night with my friend Kenny Vance, who did the music for all my movies. And they were going uptown. I was going, and she said, go downtown, I'll have dinner. We'll start a little later, go see him, and then come up and join us. And she convinced me to do it. So I go down, all the way down to the village, and I get there, and the movie ends 10 minutes later, after like a 3-hour movie, and everybody starts pouring out of the theater. And I said, wasn't there supposed to be a Q&A? And yeah, we just got word, they just announced that Quentin is doing a Q&A at another theater right now, and he got held up, and he's going to be a half hour late to do, we're going back in a half hour when he gets there for the Q&A. But in the meantime, they're serving drinks and hors d'oeuvres in the lobby. So I'm about to leave, but I see a few people that I know, friends who are at the screening. So we're schmoozing and blah, blah, blah. And after a while, I decide I don't want to wait here any longer. This is ridiculous. Wait a half hour, and then maybe I'll get to say hello. I'll probably just rush him up on stage anyhow because he's going to be late. So I say goodbye. So I get in my car. I'm one of the few people in New York who has a car. And I park right across from the theater. And as I call my wife to say, I'm coming to meet you at the restaurant. I'll be there in a half an hour. And she said, well, did you meet him? Did you meet him? I said, no, he's not even here. He's got tied up at another screening, and he got 300 people waiting for him. She said, go back inside. If he's coming, wait, you're already down there. You're down in the village. And I said, I look up and I say, I think the car is just pulling up. I see a van. And she says, well, go outside. And so I said, okay, I hang up. I walk right across the street to it's winter, and they have one of those fake doors outside so that when you open the big doors to the theater, you have it blocks the wind from going into, so a plastic door out front. And so everybody is waiting in the lobby there, like 300 people, and they say, he's here, he's here. They've been waiting 30, 40 minutes for a Q&A. So what stopped Quentin from getting out of his beautiful black limousine was about 20 photographers were there, and they captured him opening the door to his limo and was snapping his picture and asking him questions, throwing him, it was the press. And he says, guys, I gotta go, I'm late. So I go inside to, hopefully I'll be just inside the door when he walks in, but this people, at any rate, as I'm standing in this little plastic enclosed tiny room with 300 people there and the 20 photographers here, in walks Quentin Tarantino. And he opens the door, and now the two of us are in the space of a closet, a tiny little closet. You've seen it in restaurants where you have this little, with 300 people, press, photos. And I said, Quentin, I know you got to run. I just want to shake your hand. I'm such a fan of yours. My name is Marty Davidson. And he said, Marty Davidson? And he said, you're Marty Davidson? I said, yeah. He says, I'm a bigger fan of yours than you are of mine. And I said, well, I heard that you wrote, I read that piece you wrote about us, and I just wanted to thank you. And he said, are you kidding that you like that movie? He said, like that movie. I like Eddie and the Cruisers. And he rips off every one of my pictures in order. Well, all the people are waiting. And he goes, boom, 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 boom. And when he finishes, like a schmuck, I say to him, it's interesting, but you left out one movie. And I only mention it because it's my personal favorite. And he looked at me like, what the fuck did I leave out? And I said, baseball movie that I made for HBO. He said, Virginia Madsen and Billy Peters. I love that. It's the best baseball movie. I got to go. And he leaves. And eventually, 2 years later, he wrote the book. And he included all of that article that he wrote about when it was at the Beverly that I had read, and he enlarged on it, gave us a chapter in cinema speculation. If you read it, we have a full Marty Davidson, Lords of Flatbush, etc. Chapter, which is the high point of my career.
Everybody, this is Marty. I am Stefan. You guys are all beautiful. Thanks for watching. In the meantime, we're going to sign off right now. Marty, thanks for being here, okay?
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you. All right, everybody. We'll see you later. Who loves you, baby? We do. Bye-bye.
It's Coffee Talk with Adika. Nothing rhymes with that but chicken tikka. We name drop here with Stefan and all his friends.
Click on your screen for some other great episodes and become a member right here today on Coffee Talk. Support the channel, support the fun. Who loves you, baby? We do. Thanks for watching.